3 seconds. That's all it took for the crowd to recognize Atif Aslam again this week when a new concert clip started exploding online. Before he even finished the first line, the audience was already singing louder than the speakers. And honestly, that moment bothered me a little. Because people celebrate the legend now, but almost nobody talks about the brutal early years that nearly destroyed his career before it even started. Not the polished documentary version. Not the motivational quote version. I mean the real version. The confusion, the rejection, the financial pressure, the humiliation of trying to sound different in an industry that punishes difference first before rewarding it later. Because here's the uncomfortable truth I realized while researching this story. If Atif Aslam had started his career in today's hyper-toxic algorithm culture, I genuinely think half the internet would have called his voice wrong before calling it legendary. That's how risky his sound actually was in the beginning. And that changes the entire story. Because now people hear nostalgia. Back then, people heard imperfection. And those are two very different things. If you're new to Arijit Singh's story, subscribe, I post every day. Because this isn't really just a music story. It's a story about what happens when someone refuses to sound like everybody else, even when the industry quietly punishes them for it. Section 1, Before the Fame. You know what fascinates me most about Atif Aslam? He never looked like the industry's chosen one. Not at all. No giant music dynasty. No polished superstar launch. No luxury machine marketing campaign. Actually, early on, music wasn't even supposed to be the main plan. Sports mattered. Studies mattered. Normal life mattered. And I think that's why his emotional energy feels different from many manufactured pop stars. There's a rawness in his voice that sounds almost accidental. Like somebody discovering himself while the whole world is listening. That's dangerous artistically, because rawness creates obsession. But it's also dangerous commercially, because industries hate unpredictability. And early 2000s South Asian music industries loved polished vocals. Clean, controlled, traditional. Then suddenly this guy arrives sounding cracked, emotional, restless, almost unfinished. And instead of hiding those imperfections, he leaned into them. That decision changed everything. 2. The Jal years. Now here's where the tragedy really begins. The band Jal wasn't just a music project. It was survival. And when Aadat started spreading online and through pirated CDs, which younger viewers today probably can't even imagine properly, something weird happened. The song connected faster than the industry could control it. That matters. Because today TikTok decides virality. Back then, emotion decided virality. People copied songs onto phones manually. Internet cafes shared MP3 files. Friends passed tracks through Bluetooth like secret treasure. That's how powerful Aadat became. Not because a corporation pushed it. Because people emotionally kidnapped the song into their own lives. And honestly, that type of organic connection is almost impossible to fake even now. But success created another problem immediately. Ego, ownership battles, creative tension, money pressure. Classic music industry story. And here's my hot take. I think the early breakup drama around Jal actually helped build the mythology of Atif Aslam. Not emotionally for him, obviously. Probably painful. But culturally, conflict creates narrative gravity. Audiences become invested when an artist survives chaos. That's why so many legendary careers begin with instability. 3. The voice people mocked. This part honestly shocked me when I revisited old forum discussions and fan reactions. A lot of people genuinely criticized his voice early on. Too rough, too nasal, too emotional, too unstable live. And looking back now, that criticism feels almost unbelievable. Because those exact flaws became his signature. That's the irony of artistry nobody explains to young creators. Your weakness sometimes becomes your monopoly. Read that again. The thing people mock first can become the thing nobody else can replicate later. And I think creators in every field need to understand this. Especially now in 2026 where algorithms pressure everyone into becoming copies of already successful people. Even on YouTube. Look at creators like Mr. Beast. People imitate the editing style endlessly, but very few understand the emotional pacing underneath it. Same thing happened in music. People could imitate singing techniques. but they couldn't imitate the emotional instability in Atif Aslam's delivery. That emotional tension made listeners feel exposed. And that feeling became addictive. 4. Bollywood changed everything. Then Bollywood entered the picture. And this is where the story stops being regional, and becomes historic. Because once Atif Aslam crossed into Indian cinema music successfully, the scale exploded. Suddenly his voice wasn't just attached to songs. It became attached to memories. Road trips, breakups, college years, first love, loneliness. That emotional attachment is worth more than charts. Actually, I'd argue emotional memory is the real currency of music. That's why some technically perfect singers disappear while emotionally imperfect singers become immortal. And honestly, Bollywood needed him at that time. Because many polished singers sounded safe. Atif sounded risky, unpredictable, human. You could hear emotional damage in the voice. That changes how audiences connect psychologically. And here's another uncomfortable truth. I think the industry initially underestimated how much younger audiences were craving emotional realism over vocal perfection. That shift changed modern playback singing forever. 5. The hidden cost of fame. But here's the darker side nobody discusses enough. When your pain becomes commercially successful, you almost become trapped inside it. Think about that. Audiences wanted heartbreak from Atif Aslam constantly. The longing, the ache, the emotional fracture. And artists can get imprisoned by audience expectations. That's the hidden cost of iconic emotional branding. People stop allowing you to evolve freely. I've noticed this happens to creators too. The audience falls in love with one version of you, then punishes you for changing. And I honestly think Atif Aslam navigated that pressure better than most artists would have. He diversified slowly. Spiritual performances, softer songs, different vocal textures. But no matter what he released, people always came back to the emotional vulnerability. Because that vulnerability built trust. 6. Why his story matters more now. Here's why I think this story matters even more in 2026. Modern internet culture rewards fast personalities, loud opinions, short attention spans, constant visibility. But Atif Aslam built legendary status almost accidentally by doing the opposite. Mystery, selective appearances, emotional authenticity, minimal oversharing. And I think audiences are becoming exhausted by performative fame now. That's why older emotional artists are aging so powerfully online. People trust sincerity again, even when it's imperfect. Actually, especially when it's imperfect. And this is where I think Atif Aslam's career connects to broader culture beyond music. People aren't just replaying songs anymore. They're replaying emotional honesty. That's why his concerts still feel explosive years later. Not because people are chasing nostalgia only. They're chasing emotional memory. Huge difference. 7. The tragic truth about his early years. So when I call the early days tragic, I don't mean tragedy in the dramatic movie sense. I mean something quieter. The tragedy of almost being misunderstood permanently. The tragedy of being criticized for the exact thing that would later make millions love you. The tragedy of uncertainty before legacy exists. Because success stories always look obvious in reverse. But during the actual struggle, nothing feels guaranteed. And honestly, I think that's why this story hits harder now. Young creators see the legend. But they don't see the fragile phase before the legend became untouchable. That phase matters most. So what did I personally learn from Atif Aslam's story? Probably this. If everybody understands your art immediately, you might not be creating anything truly original. That's uncomfortable, but I think it's true. Because the artists who change culture usually confuse people first. And years later, those same mistakes become history. That's exactly what happened here. A rough voice, a struggling young singer, a chaotic beginning, a sound people doubted, eventually becoming one of the most emotionally recognizable voices on the planet. And honestly, that might be the greatest revenge any artist can achieve.